this corporate consolidation question. So maybe moving away from sourcing and more to distribution and retail, what are the challenges you face? Maybe talk a little bit. I bet there are some folks who probably don't know about the 3-tier distribution system. Maybe talk about some barriers to entry in terms of what it's like. So, you know, 2 local recent operations and one that is in the process of opening its doors. What's that like in terms of specifically competing with the big guys? Anyone?
There is no competition. No, there's no competition. Why? Because they produce they produce their wines at much greater margins than we do. So we're not in the industry to grow to 5 million cases. You know, we're going to actually stay under 5,000 cases. But so they're never going to be my competitor. But I do have competitors because there are thousands of wineries like Boxwood that produce small amounts of wine under 30,000 cases, and their price points generally are higher than Boxwood's for the quality. So I am competing nonstop because it's not just a local competition, it's a worldwide competition. So I'm competing against Spain, I'm competing against Greece, and you know, I'm like an esoteric wine, so I'm competing against you know, Lebanese wines and Syrian wines, etc. But there are, you know, 100,000 wineries probably in the world, or more, hundreds of thousands, and I'm competing against every single one of them that actually has a provenance. You know, so Gallo, and they don't really have a provenance.
From the craft brew side, I would say that, you know, one of the biggest challenges for us when we were getting off the ground, or one of the biggest anticipated challenges for us, was how are we going to establish these accounts? How are we going to get the restaurants and everybody on board when we have what is undeniably the most expensive local product on the craft beer market here? We know that. We're small. We can't afford to buy in bulk the same way that some of the bigger breweries can, so we're not getting that same price break. It's just like when you shop at Amazon and Amazon buys 10 million units and they can sell it for $5, and you go down to Melody, or you went down to Melody before it closed and they were selling it at $19.99. And you know, that's a hard thing about being a small new brewery. The other end of it is that I'm not trying to compete with Bud. I'm not trying to compete with any of the big mass market producers. It's a totally different product.
For a different market.
For a different market, right. I mean, if I'm going to a Redskins game, or, you know, just going to hang out and pound beers all day, you know, I can drink Guinness till the cows come home. But if I'm going out and I want to have like an experience and enjoy a craft beer, I'm going to order a craft beer and I'm cool with paying a higher price for it. But it's the same thing with when you're going out for a really nice meal. You guys know that when you go out and you're like, I'm dying for a top-notch like steak or a top-notch Italian dinner, you'll go and you'll spend it. As consumers, we're more informed now and we know what we want, and I think the majority of us are willing to pay for it when that's what we want. If I'm going out for a steak, I'm going to go to a nice steakhouse because I'm willing to spend my money on what I want. The craft beer consumer is kind of the same way. So we appreciate that. Thanks. Go ahead, Thor.
Please. I don't know where to go. You guys said everything.
Well,
I think the consumers are much more educated now than they were 15 years ago. When we opened a beer bar underneath Pizzeria Paradiso in Georgetown in 2006, that was my argument to Ruth, the owner, is that Whole Foods is selling Bell & Evans chicken, you know, an all-organic chicken, because the reason they're doing that is because the consumers in this area are much more educated and they care a lot more about what they're consuming. And the reason they care is because they have a huge wealth of information due to the internet. And so now they have a lot more, a much greater understanding of what's going into their food and what actually is the end result of, you know, the raising of the animals or the growing of the food. I think Glens Garden Market is a wonderful example of, you know, how educated consumers really are, and they're actually now they're able to differentiate between what what the terms local mean, and organic and biodynamic and things like that, and then be able to make a choice what is most important for them. And so if we didn't have such a wonderfully educated consumer base, then I don't think the craft beer industry or the craft wine industry would really survive.
I got a question for you, Thor. Just because you and I have kind of been in the beer business in this town for over a decade, well over a decade. What would you say is like the biggest thing that changed? Why now do we have craft breweries opening in DC? Why do we have, why are you guys, what motivated you to do your project and open up the brew pub?
What motivated me was DC itself. DC it's a small southern town, I think in a lot of ways, that has a lot of growing up to do, and it's the city itself has taken a long time to recover from its lowest points in the 60s, and now that the population is coming back, they're starting to fill up the old neighborhoods. I mean, in neighborhoods that 10 years ago we didn't know even existed. Truxton Circle, and for instance, a friend of mine just moved into Truxton Circle. I'm like, what the hell is that? These neighborhoods are starting to define themselves. The people living in those neighborhoods are proud of the neighborhood that they live in. They're developing their own little niche economies, their own identities, and so DC is becoming a hyper local economy, where it's not just one broad economy, it's many small different economies that are all neighborhood based. And I think that it is going to be a long time before 68 square miles, which is DC, is going to be saturated with locally produced products, craft products, artisanal products that can be absorbed by the growing population.
Sounds like you're going to need to expand.
Yeah, we want to
Open the doors first, maybe? Yeah, maybe.
We'd like to open the doors for the first one.
That'll be good.
But it'll happen.
No, but you're right, and it's about locating each of these locations. So when it comes to wine, again, it's about growing, it's about production in that specific agricultural space. When it comes to beer, and particularly a brew pub, where you're trying to attract people into the restaurant itself to say, we're serving this here, you're specifically in the Shaw Howard neighborhood. And that's all, every time I've read about Right Proper, it's Shaw Howard, and as it should be.
We're very proud of the neighborhood we're in. We're very proud of the building that we're in. The building used to be Frank Holliday's pool hall back in from like 1910 through the mid-1920s, and that's where Duke Ellington said he actually learned how to play jazz piano. He was being taught piano at his house on T Street a few blocks away, but then when he was 13, 14, 15 years old, he would sneak out of his house and sneak into Frank Holliday's and play the piano there from all the great musicians that were coming over from the Howard Theater. So there's such a huge, rich history there that we can't ignore. I mean, these neighborhoods, they've gone through this huge, kind of roller coaster of life, and now, they're really coming back to life, and we have to honor that, and we have to pay homage to that.
What would be the one piece of advice you would have to the public, the consuming public, folks who are interested in drinking local craft beer and wine? What should they be thinking about that they are not otherwise?
Beaver over
There we
here.
go.
See? A couple beers in.
Apparently, Thor has the answer.
I think that the next big thing to happen for the casual beer consumer or the casual craft beer enthusiast in Washington, D.C. is going to be the ability to identify flaws in a beer, and the ability to identify a freshly brewed beer versus a beer that has been brewed a long time ago, maybe heated up, maybe it's materized, maybe it's oxidized. Because that is really, unfortunately, the craft beer industry in DC has been so focused on what is hip, what is new, what is hard to get. There's been a huge focus on imported beer. I'm largely to blame for that, as are you.
No. Not my fault.
Okay, so I'm largely to blame for that. But what people are going to start to understand is what a really good, well-made fresh beer tastes like, and I think that they're going to start to demand a freshly brewed beer, and not a beer that's come from thousands and thousands of miles away and sat in a warehouse for God knows how long.
I'd have to piggyback with Thor and say that is definitely where I hope that the consumer goes, is being able to know and identify why fresh local beer tastes so much better, than, you know, something that's shipped from California or the Pacific Northeast or the Pacific Northwest, Atlantic Northeast. You know, when we're talking about our beers that we have for growler hours or stuff that we're distributing around town, I mean, the Southern Belle that they have on tap here at Glens tonight was kegged last week. 9 times out of 10, if you find our beers at a bar, you're going to have basically week-old beer. If you were to check the times and date stamps on any of the stuff that was coming from Cali, I'd assume at the least you're going to have about a month of shelf sitting before you're ever getting it. So that's definitely something that you guys should pay attention to, enjoy when you go out and you're going to places like Glens or other places where you can get growlers filled, or some of the breweries or beer bars that are a little bit more open with their displays of knowledge, and they're willing to tell you when this keg was filled. Ask them. Say, hey, I see you've got 2 of the Dome on. When was that filled? And any good beer man will tell you. I'll go downstairs and I'll look at it and I'll tell you that it was kegged last week. So yeah, fresh, ultra fresh. It's one of the best benefits of drinking local. So thank you for coming out.
That's definitely not the same situation in the wine industry. Yeah. Our wines are made to age. And that's why we have cork closures, is because these are ageable wines. So that's not where I would go with that question. It's more about, you know, supporting your local economy. So it's sustainability of the local economy. That would be one, and then also a quality factor. So what I would like for the consumer to do basically is start to ask questions of, okay, well, wine gives me a headache. All right, well, let's talk about what wine you're drinking. You know, oh, well, I was drinking, you know, Kim Scott or whatever, Fetzer, whatever, from God knows where. Who knows where the grapes came from, really. But the larger the volume of wine produced, the less artisanal it is, and the less easy it is for the winemaker to follow the fermentation process of the wine. So they just haphazard. They have a recipe, not in the same way as beer, but they say, okay, well, I'm going to do my sulfur additions on this tank of 200,000 gallons. Whatever, so it stays fresh. You know, we have a freshness issue as well for wine during the fermentation process. But when it's craft wine and it's well made, you're not going to get a headache, I promise you that. So think about, you know, what the flavors are in the wines. The price is, generally speaking, if you buy a glass of wine in between $10 and $15 a glass, you're sure to get a decent wine as long as the person is honest who's making it. But I would say, as a local winery, that you would want to support your local economy. That's the most important thing. And people like me and other great wineries that are actually growing their own grapes and making their own wine and taking hits from year to year just to produce a product that comes from this glorious land that is Virginia, D.C., and Maryland. I'm so very proud to be from. So thanks to you all for coming tonight and supporting Boxwood.